Hello, beautiful little ice cream cookies. It is week 220, and this week we are talking about struggles in both your spiritual life and your actual life. Now, fair warn you, this topic has brought up a lot for me, and I am inserting here a trigger warning. I'm also going to put it in the down bar below. The places you are going to want to skip. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but if you have any history with abuse, domestic abuse, molestation, or you have issues with murder or death, there are going to be some parts of this story you're going to want to skip. So without further ado, let's get into week 220. Now, I'm going to start with struggles of life first, and I'm going to fair warn you, this does not start pretty. So in the down bar, there will be a link to the place where I stop talking about crazy, yucky stuff and start talking about how I deal with struggles in spirituality and struggles with my life. So here we go. So when I was young, domestic abuse was pretty rampant in my house. It was a daily occurrence where my parents would physically go at each other. I thought this was normal for a very long time, and as a child, I was always curious as to what I had done wrong, what my brother had done wrong, what my mom had done wrong, why my dad was so mad, and why we were being punished for it. This rolls in later to my experiences with God, and I was constantly questioning and wrestling with why God would punish people when I had no idea what we had done to be punishable. Moving on a little bit, as I was a little bit older, I found my birth certificate and found out that the man who had raised me, the man I had really called Dad, was not my biological father. This was a fact that was hidden from me. The only way I found out is that I had found my birth certificate. It was a big, large thing. I was told that that was a joke, that it was an accident, etc., etc. Upon finding out that it is actually my valid birth certificate, I had an issue with identity and who I was and why my biological father didn't want me. And then when my parents got divorced, then my grandfather stepped up. And that was pretty difficult for most of my childhood, which kind of fed into my depression, which I had for at least 11 to 12 years. I still struggle with depression. However, I have a therapist and I'm medicated, so that's helpful. I was not for a very long time, and I made it very difficult. So after my birth certificate situation and my parents got divorced, I was molested by two different adults in the same family and on multiple occasions. Then there was an instance when we were at a community event at a lake, and they had a little circle of guys that were all joking around drinking during this event, and I was passed around in a circle of about 6 to 8 gentlemen, if you can call them that, who then molested me underwater. So that just added to my depression, my feelings of unworthiness, and my continued questions about why God punished people that didn't do anything. So then I got to high school, and I was molested by a boy at school, in school, which just added complications. And then my uncle was murdered, and I don't mean was in the wrong place and accidentally got shot. I mean he was purposefully shot multiple times in the back, in the chest, in the heart, and in the head. I also lost my grandfather, who kind of became a secondary father figure to me. I lost my grandfather to cancer. Again, I didn't understand why God would allow my grandfather to die in that manner, or my uncle to die in that manner, and why God had allowed it to affect the rest of his family that way. after high school, I got married really young. I got married at 19. And my husband was abusive. There was domestic abuse. It was never claimed because I was terrified that he would kill me. In fact, he told me once that if I died, at least he'd know where I was. He was very controlling. I'm no longer in that situation. But when I decided to file for divorce, it took me 2 years because I struggled with the morality of divorce. I had made a vow. I had made an oath to my husband and in front of deity that I was going to be there through good times and bad, sickness and in health, the whole 9 yards. And so it was difficult for me to get to a point where it was okay for me to validate to myself that I could file for a divorce. Before that, I thought that, I have chosen this person, I've made this vow, regardless of the situation. This is the bed that I made and I need to lie in it. And I stayed in that marriage for way longer than I should have. So there's that. After that situation, I have remarried, and as some of you from my personal page know, I struggle with infertility, and my husband and I have been trying to adopt. We are nearly 3 years in the process. We still do not have children. That is a constant wrestling battle for me about why I'm no longer allowed to have children. When I had my daughter, my fertility rates were off the charts. And now they're not, and I have difficulty conceiving. So there's a lot of both life struggles, emotional struggles, and all of that. So as you can tell, I'm no stranger to struggle. It's fairly common for me, especially in my life. So let's talk about some revelations. So after all of these things, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, this is not a woe to me post. This is just me telling you. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not looking for Wyld Bells. This is my past. This is who I am. I own that and I am moving forward. But after all of these things have occurred to me and I have witnessed all of these things, I am currently of the belief that anyone is capable of anything if they are pushed. You can be pushed toward good. You can be pushed towards not good. You can be neutral. It all is dependent on your predisposed nature and what is nurtured in you. If we nurture diversity and we nurture justice and we nurture inclusivity, those are the things that flourish. If we encourage hatred and division and lies and hurt, that's what flourishes. No, I don't believe that everybody is, all these horrible, despicable things. I believe that truth and justice is important. That's why I'm comedic. Well, it's one of the reasons why I'm comedic. Ma'at is a really big thing for us. It's about the scales of justice. It's about the scales of balance. The weighing of the heart of both deeds and acts. And I think that is something that I continuously am growing and expanding on. But for me, that's really where I stand right now. So now that we've talked about the delicious struggles of my life, oh, what an adventure they are, let's talk about some struggles of faith. So I wasn't really brought up religious per se. There were certain things that were acceptable religiously. Yep, that's the word we're going with, religiously. And when I started to discover that there were other things out there, my drive was to go towards them. That was not discouraged. However, it wasn't in the applicable, appropriate list. And so when I decided that I wanted to study paganism, there was an instance where I was outed. If you'd like to see that video, link is in sidebar probably. I just did a video about that. So I was outed before I was ready. I was outed by my own mother. It did not go very well. And that was a struggle for me. Like, why I struggled with why that was allowed to happen. I struggle with, was I ready for that to come out? I struggle with why God, why deity, why the universe would allow that to happen. Or what choices were made. And it's a constant back and forth for me even to this day. When around that time I would hear things that weren't there, like not voices in my head, like external things, like, you know, when you're in an old house the floor creaks, or sometimes you can hear doors opening and shutting, sometimes you can hear balls bouncing, things like that. I was hearing things externally that I didn't know how to explain, and that was terrifying. I was terrified about why I could hear things, and was I crazy, and, you know, why was I hearing things but nobody else was, or why I was experiencing that. And that was really a struggle for me to accept that A, that was a thing, and B, that I was really having this experience. And then as I began to accept myself and accept the things that I was capable of doing while studying magic and paganism that were not normal, I emerged as this not quite yet a butterfly caterpillar of weird quirkiness. And that was, people were constantly questioning my faith, questioning my abilities, whether or not I was crazy. And that was really hard for me to go through those ebbs and flows of growing into an adult and dealing with all of that as well. And then there was a period of just barrenness, where regardless of how many prayers, how many offerings, how many anything, nothing. Silence. The sounds stopped. I mean, nothing. I couldn't feel energy anymore. All of the things that I had been able to experience up until that point just stopped. Now, I don't know if that's because I closed myself off or whether it just dried up. I'm not really sure. Now, it has come back. Those experiences, those abilities, they have reemerged. But there was a time where I thought that I had imagined all of those things because they were just no longer there. And then, as I said previously, when I was with my ex, that got a little crazy, and I was not allowed to openly be what I had gained up until that point, which is probably part of the reason why those abilities dried up. And that was hard for me, that I had allowed someone to control me so much that I had dried up those abilities. And then when that divorce went through, I had the freedom to express my spirituality however I wanted. And I can tell you, went a little haywire. I mean, I had tapestries and candles and incense and altars everywhere. And for a while, that was really freeing. But that taught me something about ebbs and flows. And sometimes there's a barrenness in our practice. And there's no response. And wrestling with you have this vast knowledge of all these different things, and yet you're experiencing nothing. And then there are other times when you have no knowledge whatsoever, and you're experiencing all of these things. And so I think it's true of spirituality in general, especially now as it's entirely nuanced and singular, that everything changes all the time, and everybody is always in their own cycles of flow, and not everybody's matches up ever. In fact, it's really rare that people's match up. However, I think that consistently lighting candles and consistently finding a space within your spirituality, even if it's really basic stuff, to take 5 minutes to meditate, 5 minutes to sit outside and soak up the sun during summer, or 5 minutes to be outside in the ice and the rain and experience the cycles that is, and allow that spiritual landscape to continuously grow. But as I've gotten into raising plants and herbology and things like that, I feel like sometimes those places where we think that everything is so barren are our fallow periods, in which everything is just left to lie, and nothing grows. But that next harvest, that next cycle, where things are growing and things are progressing, our growth is so expansive. And I think part of the beauty of that spot is the struggle before the blossoming of those hard sown seeds after that fallow period. So there you are. There's my very long video on the struggles of life and spirituality. Until next time, stay solitary.